Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's MarkMonitor webinar, where we are joined by anti-counterfeiting expert Camilla Heron, who will be covering how to build a successful anti-counterfeiting strategy. I'm Reagan Damu of MarkMonitor, and I'll be setting the stage for the event and moderating today's Q&A session. Before today's webinar, I'd just like to run through a few housekeeping items. During the event, all participant lines will be muted. That's simply to ensure there isn't any background noise or interference. Following today's presentation, we'll be holding a Q&A session, and to submit your question for our speaker, please use the Q&A tab located on your screen. For reasons we don't have time to get to, we'll be sure to follow up with you via email after the event. Now, recording today's webinar, and Friday we plan to send out a follow-up email, everyone with a link to the recording and presentation slides. So please be on the lookout for those. Lastly, there will be a brief survey immediately following today's webinar, and I encourage you to participate because your feedback can only make our events all the better. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our speaker for today's session. We're fortunate to be joined by anti-counterfeiting expert Camilla Heron. Camilla is Senior Brand Protection Consultant at MarkMonitor and is well-versed in all aspects of global brand protection. Her experience ranges from online enforcement to transnational and domestic criminal investigations and prosecutions, as well as supporting numerous civil litigations. She began her career as a DEA intelligence analyst. In 2002, she transitioned to supporting corporate anti-counterfeiting programs for such brands as Microsoft, Symantec, and Apple. She Monster Cable in 2009 to help and run their global brand protection program. Current role, she provides strategic consulting and support for clients in all aspects of their brand protection endeavors. She works closely with clients to provide guidance on various brand protection-related challenges, support investigative and litigation issues, as well as how to bridge from the digital world into the physical investigative world, working with law enforcement. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn things over to Camilla to get us started.
Morning, everybody. Nice to be here. So we get started and to our first slide here. And I just want to, preface this. Most of you who are working in this brand protection field understand that the bigger players in the counterfeiting world are very sophisticated and pay attention to what we're doing. And the counterfeiting issue is growing every year, and the numbers are speaking to about $350 billion annually in losses, and it's growing about 25% year over year for pretty much across industry lines. It's not industry specific. Everybody's sort of experiencing more of an explosion in this problem. I would really recommend when people start out with the program, I need to go back for a second. Anybody who's on the line today who's in a position of needing to start a brand new protection program from the ground up, I've walked in your shoes. I came into Monster. They had no existing program, and I was there for about 3 weeks before the counterfeiting tidal wave of Beats headphones hit. And so I had to get my program started and running as quickly as possible. Luckily for me, they were already employing the digital marketing best practices by monitoring the professional e-commerce sites. They had MarkMonitor on board, so when I came in, I actually had statistics and data ready to start my program with as to which of our products were being hit the most significantly, areas I needed to try and focus on. These big actors are search engine optimization experts. These are no longer the fly-by-night little players. These are organized criminal syndicates that have unlimited financial resources and human resources. Some of them actually have implemented better supply chains than some of us have in place. And they do their market research. They study our behavior. They study which new products we're going to be bringing to market. They do their market research. For instance, we go on to try to buy some counterfeit product of a new line that we're offering, and they'll have it advertised, but it's not for sale. So they're trying to figure out which colors or which models they actually focus on making first. 14% of the brand searches jacked by affiliate misuse, competitors, counterfeiters, all trying to drive traffic away from your legitimate sites to their sites, and they're stealing your business that way. So they take advantage of the consumer shopping behavior. It's 20-to-1, the growing trend of online people looking for deals versus brick-and-mortar shopping. And that trend has grown in the U.S., but it's particularly exploding in China. The e-commerce over there is really taken off, so that's adding to the problem there. Unfortunately, 1 in 5 online shoppers are duped. They realize that when they go online, these websites and marketplace sellers are defrauding them, stealing from them. And they're also moving from just the marketplaces and websites. They're moving into social media, on Facebook and on the mobile apps. And so we need to stay current and focused as to the emerging trends with them. And they're always looking for new opportunities and more progressive. So for the next one, losing revenues to the fraudsters at growing exponential amounts. It addresses our business impact because of quality issues. And when we have customers who have bad customer experiences, they think they're buying legitimate, the product either fails, is broken, or just doesn't work well, it really impacts your brand. We've also noticed most companies an increase in your customer service volume calls. People buying bad product, they want to return it. There's a lot of warranty fraud going on. And it strains your channel relationships. Your distributors and retail partners want to know what you're doing to try and contain and mitigate the problem because their sales are impacted. So the more proactive you are, it also addresses that issue. The brand reputation issues it creates a lot of brand confusion for the consumers. And once you've had a negative customer experience, that gets online, it's in the blogs, it's in your negative email feedback. It impacts and creates more of a customer satisfaction issue. It erodes your trust. It's to your revenue loss as far as your warranty fraud issue. That's a growing problem as well. Because by the time you've discovered that you've had a counterfeit product returned for warranty, the credits are been issued and you can't get that revenue back. Also, for certain brands, health and safety brands or electronics, liability factors growing. You've got counterfeit pharmaceuticals or fire hazards, and so that's another reason that you actually really need to focus on developing a solid brand protection program. Certain things that some companies do that aren't really great practices. Some companies just put their head in the sand and ignore the problem. They don't really do much of anything. They just sort of figure it'll take care of itself. But more and more brands are realizing that they do have a problem and that they do need to begin addressing it. And the manufacturing is also expanding around the world. It's not just based in Asia anymore. It's coming out of Eastern Europe and Latin America. So you do need to be globally proactive. You can't just operate in one area and region of the world. Some companies actually are trying to monitor what's happening on the web, and with the volume of increase and the scale, that actually really not having any impact. You're spending a lot of time and someone's chipping away at the problem, but you're not actually addressing the problem, because for every few lists that you're able to remove or websites you're able to get down, there's exponential numbers that have been added in the online space. Some companies also treat infringements equally. They don't realize that some of the players are small-time players and some of the players are big-time actors. And if you focus on all of them equally, you're missing and spending all your time and resources on not the big players, the ones that are damaging you the most. Some people also try to respond to every instance of infringement, which sucks up a huge amount of time. And if you just focus on the big actors, you're going to have a better result. It's sort of the 80-20 rule that 80% of them are damage, but not on the scale that the 20% of the big actors are causing. So prioritize which targets you want to go after. Gain visibility and scope the problem as you're starting a program, because you've got to decide which resources you need, what kind of budget you need. So actually the only way to do this is through technology. That allows you to see the scale and scope of your problem and how global it is. You need to define your strategy clearly and set your objectives. And I've seen more success in protection programs when you have an executive sponsor that can actually help get budget and resources that you need. Plus, it gives messaging across the company that you're putting a brand protection program in place, the purpose of the program, and what your objectives are. Because a lot of times in companies, people know this is a brand protection team, but they don't understand what the team is supposed to accomplish, what they do, what their function is. Cross-functional teams. You're not going to be working in isolation. You can set up your program in legal or security or marketing, but you're going to actually be working with different business groups across the full spectrum of the company. You're going to be working with manufacturing, supply chain, distribution channels, quality control, e-commerce folks in your company, marketing, legal, and sometimes even PR, depending on the messaging you want to put out in public. Monitor, prioritize, and enforce both distribution and promotion points. You can't just focus on one. Collective problem, and they impact each other. Leverage your online intelligence to inform your offline defenses. People choose to focus just on the online space, but there are civil litigation avenues, there are criminal avenues that you can pursue. And if you want a full brand protection spectrum that covers your whole company, anticipate and plan to build on all three of these different kind of elements. Don't just focus on one. You can start with one and then evolve out, but to give you best protection, do all three. Partnering with law enforcement is a key element here if you're planning on doing real-world on-the-ground enforcement. And my biggest advice there is really partner with law enforcement, engage with them, find out what their needs are, what they need from you to initiate investigations, and follow them through, and also be extremely responsive to law enforcement. When customer law enforcement contact you about suspect product, try and respond as quickly as possible. Some actually don't respond, and what happens is law enforcement just stops contacting them when they make seizures. Educate your customers. Sometimes, like I said, the people out in the buying consumer world aren't really sure. They aren't even aware there's a counterfeiting problem. So if you come at it from a consumer protection perspective, it can help them learn how to buy safely. That actually is helpful for them. Okay, so let's slide one. You're going to gain visibility and scope the problem. You understand your problem globally. You understand the counterfeiting online ecosystem. It's constantly changing and evolving. You need to monitor the trends as they change. And sometimes on the online space, there's just too much going on, too many moving parts. And that's why having a third-party partner in the online monitoring for you can really help. I would reach back to MarkMonitor and ask them, hey, I'm seeing this problem and trend, and are any of your other clients facing the same problem? Can you put me in touch with any of your other clients so I can talk to them about possible solutions they've come up with? That was very helpful. You really need to understand the breadth and depth of the problem, and this speaks to the fact when you go back to budget and resource allocation, you need to be able to justify what you're asking for, and having a real understanding actually helps on that. You need to monitor where they're promoting it and how they're selling it. Comprehensive. Understand the volume of the web traffic and sales, and this also speaks to budget allocation and support for resources, because as you build out your program, you're going to need resources. You're going to bolt on different pieces. You're going to need outside vendors for test purchases or investigative needs, and all those costs need to be rolled in and planned for. And sometimes you can't actually anticipate what those are going to be, so there needs to be hopefully some buffer in there where you can go back and ask for more resources as you get your program rolling. Understand the impact of your business and set your priorities. And these issues affect your reputation, they affect you financially, and you're being attacked on multiple vectors. You know, e-commerce, marketplace, search engines, social media, even spam emails. These are effective at undermining you in all sorts of different ways. When you're designing your anti-counterfeiting strategy, try and have very clear, realistic expectations and manage those expectations. Don't let your executives and internal business unit partners have unrealistic expectations. Be honest about what you can actually achieve and accomplish. You are not going to be able to stop this problem. You can mitigate it and suppress it to some degree and go after some of the bigger players, but you can't stop it. You can reduce your online counterfeit sales and web traffic. You can be targets for further investigation or civil suits. And throughout all this, you're actually going to be improving your business processes throughout the company, because as you partner with the different business units, you're going to find that you're tightening and making your processes more secure and efficient over time. Develop a roadmap or plan. You can't come in and try and do everything at one time. You actually got to have a logical progression and roadmap, and try to have some time benchmarks that helps you stay on target. And there again, it keeps your expectations realistic. If people know how long you anticipate it's going to take for you to be effective in certain areas. Lay out the elements of what you need, and then kind of phased-in approach. If you start with the online issue, which is kind of your base, which provides you with your consistent suppression and mitigation, then you can actually be high-value targets at online information. You can take for civil litigation or criminal, depending on what you want. Now, different companies have different personalities and different priorities. Some companies only want to focus on the online space. Others want to do civil as well as criminal. I did all three, but I started with the online piece at Monster. Then I moved into the criminal piece, and once we had that underway with our test purchases and engaging with law enforcement, then we moved into the civil litigation piece. You need to partner with your different business units, as I said, and if you do that early when you're starting your program, it'll give you a lot of confusion and delay. If you're upfront with people and saying, you know, at some point we're going to need to come to you, we're going to need some of your time and help with developing product identification guides, consumer protection information, putting information on the web, being kept apprised of if there's any running changes to the product coming down the pike, so that I can keep my product identification guides current for law enforcement and customs. That's kind of an ongoing thing that needs to be put in place as well, a process for that. And different business units have different priorities, so be sensitive to what they're looking for, what their needs are, and how you can assist them in meeting their objectives. By developing a cross-functional team, like you avoid delays, confusion, and a lot of duplication of effort. Sometimes in companies, different business units are doing different elements of brand protection, and if you can actually put them into your unit, it can actually help other units save time and resources, because you've taken on that load and that burden. You can maximize your budget, and everybody understands the scope problem and what objectives are. So touch with the folks. I would actually advise a monthly conference call with some of these different business units. Let them know where you are in your progress in setting up your program, successful things that have happened. You've had, you know, good seizures, what was seized. You've had good criminal actions. It keeps people interested and engaged when you let them know what you're doing in your program. You're not kind of operating off-site in isolation. It also helps to keep them apprised of the changing dynamics of the counterfeiting landscape. The factors are constantly evolving, and letting the whole business know at the same time, people understand your challenges. If you're trying to work on something and you hit a roadblock or a constraint, they have a better understanding of why you might not be able to help them with the project at that time. It just sort of keeps everybody on the same page at the same time. And that speaks to the educating your organization piece. A lot of people in companies know that a brand protection program exists, but they don't understand what your function is, what your objectives are, and where you're really there. So keep people informed, and you're going to find that people across the company are very interested in what you're doing. When you have raids and you let people know that they're happening, people are more willing to be engaged. They ask questions. They're more willing to help you when you need help along the line. So once you've engaged with these other business units across the company, as budget challenges emerge as you expand your program, a lot of times it's easier to get budget if you can get pieces of the budget from these different business units so that the brand protection program doesn't have to carry the whole cost. You can start out with your budget at the beginning of the year and you think you've got it covered, but you can't really anticipate what uncertain things are going to come along, and if you adjustments, sometimes people are willing to kick in money to help you if they're fully engaged in your process. Monitor and prioritize your enforcement. You're actually disrupting the distribution and promotion of counterfeits. The others are using the same marketing tactics to drive traffic you are. They're doing, like I said, their market research. You advertise, they're going to mimic how you advertise. They're going to mimic where you advertise and the volume of advertising you do. Some of their counterfeit advertising is really, really good. It actually looks exactly like yours. Some of the websites you will not be able to tell until you get on the back end into the coding that they're not actually your website, which is so easy for them to dupe unwitting consumers. Also, you've got to stay focused on, like I said, changing patterns and trends. These guys are always trying to find better ways to undermine your business, and you need to pay attention so that you're agile and flexible. And as they find a new way to circumvent your mitigation tactics, be creative and find new ways to do them and mitigate them. So if you try to decide on which of the players are the most important to you, and by doing the online enforcement, like I said, the 80-20 rule, if you can get 80% of them removed quickly and kind of suppressed, it gives you the time to focus on the 20% of the bad actors that are actually causing you the most damage. And the online monitoring and constant removals is actually creating sustained suppression and disruption of these guys' business practices. You're interrupting their sales on a constant basis. It does solve the problem, but it does cause disruption in how they're generating revenue. Keep tricks as you go along. You need to justify your program, and you need to be able to show success measurements. So if you conduct case-by-case cost-benefit analysis for your problem websites, how many you've been able to take down, how long you've been able to keep them down, how much traffic you've been able to stop, how much traffic you've recovered to your legitimate website. This all speaks to the success of your program, and executives actually need and want that kind of information. You've got to be able to provide it. You can't just go out and not show progress. You want to be able to show progress in everything you do. You want to become, like I said, a kind of a constant irritant. Like I said, you're never going to stop the counterfeiting, but you can actually drive them to go toward companies and targets that are not as diligent and strong in protecting their brands. They'll show over to easier targets where they can just, more revenue and be more successful. You're going to be able to do all this yourself. So be willing to leverage third-party partnerships in your ongoing strategy. You're going to bolt on vendors that can do test purchases for you, who can take investigations and run them and develop them to the point where they're ready to pass off to law enforcement. So be shy about that. Don't be afraid of it. There's a lot of great vendors out there, and a great way to find that is simply reach out to other people in your industry and ask who they're using. That's, for me, I found that's one of the best ways to find vendors to use is by just simply asking, you know, I have this problem. Have you had the problem? And if you have, how did you solve it? Who did you use to do that? Also share intelligence and cost with your competitors. Yes, you're competing on selling your branded products, but as far as the problems, you've got the same actors working against you as them. So you can share revenue for investigations and intelligence on high-value targets, and don't be afraid to do that as well. I've had a success with that. Use all your weapons. Use cease and desist, which are a low-cost, kind of constant suppress this. You can use it for baseline enforcement, and you can escalate it's about, you know, the 20% that are still causing you the problems. Go to your UDRPs. They're more costly, they take more time, but that's sort of the only way you can address some of these bigger actors. They aren't going to go away as easily. If you track, like I said, if you need your metrics and statistics to show your progress and success, track your metrics. And your third-party vendor can do that for you. If you get your monthly report, you're not generating that. That can come in and you can show how websites you removed, how marketplaces you've taken down, revenue factors, the estimated quantities of products that they've taken down, and the amount of web traffic that you've been able to suppress and divert back and recapture for your own legitimate websites. Gauge situation, and you're dealing with your internal partners and retail partners and distributors. Say there's gray market diversion or whatever. Sensitive to how you deal with them. Some you can be a little more firm with, some you need to be more tactful and a little more gentle. But there's different approaches to different people that you engage with in your business, and so be sensitive to that. Also, one of your measurements is you measure how many sites you take down and how many you can keep down. And that's actually a pretty good benchmark metric. Leverage online intelligence for online efforts. I told you I started out with the online piece, and once I got that up and running and that was working smoothly, we wanted to move into the criminal aspect. So I derived my high-value targets from the intelligence I got off of the internet enforcement and focused in on the bigger actors and the sellers, the ones that were causing us the most problem. So, you know, most of the countries that are causing the problems, the most significant one, of course, is China, which is the most challenging to work with. And a lot of the ISPs are challenging. The actors are sophisticated enough. You hit them a few ISPs and get them down, and they're not from one ISP to another until they land with the ones in the Netherlands and certain areas in the world where you just simply are not going to get any cooperation from the ISPs getting these guys down. Also, on the intelligence piece, on my targets, and we'd look at them in the criminal space, then we'd also go out and look at where else are they selling. Are they a brick and mortar as well? Are they selling on eBay, Amazon? Are they on Facebook? Are they selling on mobile apps? It also helps you develop your investigations so they're broader, deeper, and when you finally go after these guys, they're going to be more effective. For enforcement strategies and investigations, companies are reluctant to do criminal arrests and prosecutions. I'm not sure why. Because the more public you are with that, the more your consumers know that you're actually really out there trying to protect them. Also, our retail partners and distribution partners really appreciated the fact that we were being that aggressive. Now, one of the things you're going to really need to do is develop a partnership with enforcement and licensed investigators. You can, initiate investigations, and then they take it out and develop it. And you're going to need to address chain of custody issue processes for evidence. Whether you do test purchases in-house, is going to require kind of an in-house infrastructure to manage that. Or if you contract that out, you need to constantly be aware that there are legal requirements when you're handling evidence that you're going to use for civil litigation or for criminal actions. Chain of custody has to pass along with the evidence if you're changing, custodians. If you're going to do evidence storage in-house on site, I really strongly advise that you set up a controlled storage space for your evidence, ideally with monitored camera and controls that you can document. If you get to court, you can be able to show that who touched the evidence, when they touched it, and where it's been held, so that they can't claim it was compromised. And once you engage with law enforcement and these outside investigators, they'll be able to teach you the criteria of the things you need to follow and what they need from you. So follow their leads, and once you kind of get into the groove with that, you know what their processes are, and it gets easier and less time-consuming to do that. Civil litigation is going to have the same issues on the chain of custody and the test purchases. I would strongly suggest that you use licensed investigators to do the test buys. Some people do it in-house, and that's not a problem, but there again, then you have to have your evidence storage situation in place. You've got to, I call it bagging and tagging your evidence. You've got to number your evidence. You have to inventory your evidence, store it. You have to be able to find it and be accountable for it at all times. All with each test buy, you need to have a court-ready report on who the target was, from whom you purchased, who did the test buy, and the process of what happened with that, what you bought, how much you paid, when you bought it. And because we're not sure, what we did is we had some criminal investigations that we include, and then we had follow-on civil litigation after that. So by having the fixed process in place, we never had any issues with that. When you're working with law enforcement, try a dedicated person or persons in the that law enforcement can touch base with any time when they need to. Like I said earlier, being responsive is one of the keys to developing a really good, strong law enforcement relationship. If they know you're going to help them, they're going to be much more willing to help you long term. So if you get a customs request or a phone call for product authentication or questions, try to get back to them within 2 to 3 days, because for customs, they have time constraints. They're only able to hold the seized suspect goods for a certain amount of time before they have to release them. And I've heard so many stories from customs inspectors and officials that they regretfully had to let huge counterfeit shipments go through because the companies weren't responsive in helping them do the product identification. Federal enforcement has higher thresholds as far as financial damages before they're able to take on the cases. Most law enforcement have the will to help you. Unfortunately, with resource constraints, cutbacks, they just simply don't have the manpower and resources to take on every case that you think might be important. So for some local law enforcement, it will take smaller cases, but for federal law enforcement, you actually need to demonstrate significant financial loss before they're actually going to be able to take that on. The other issue with law enforcement is once you pass an investigation onto them, you need to understand that they own that investigation. You're not going to be able to take the investigation back. In a lot of cases, they're not going to inform you as to the progress of the investigation, and people find that really frustrating. You know, you go and say, hey, we handed you this great case, what's happening with that? Well, by law, they're just simply not allowed to tell you that. And so be aware of that going in, that you're going to lose control of that. And sometimes some companies aren't willing to do that, but that's the reality. Some states actually have wonderful dedicated anti-counterfeiting units. Los Angeles and New York being the two main ones I call out. They have dedicated anti-counterfeiting units that do nothing but focus on counterfeiting crime. They're successful and extremely helpful, and they're wonderful to work with. So reach out to them, and if you have questions about that, let us know here, and I can put you in touch with the right people in those two venues that can help you do that. Make training with law enforcement a priority, whether it's on the street, trying to do these investigations on the ground, or customs officials. Develop your product identification guides as comprehensively as you can. U.S. Customs has an intranet, online intranet, and when you get your customs product identification guide, they'll post it internally, so all their agents at all the ports of entry can go online and actually look at the photographs you've produced comparing counterfeit product with genuine product, and it's extremely helpful for them. And I've done training at airports and shipping hubs, and the more training you can do, the more it's appreciated. They also really like when you bring in physical counterfeit product and genuine product that they can actually touch. Being able to touch the product and look at it and feel the difference in weight, the different texture and color is actually a really good tool when you're doing your training. I'm surprised at how many companies haven't actually registered their marks with Customs. Customs actually can't seize or do anything on suspect product unless you've registered your trademarks with them. Some people think that registering them with permit is all that's required. There's actually a second step here that you need to follow. And educate your customers. I can't stress enough. Most consumers are looking for the real thing. There's a certain percentage that know they're looking for counterfeit, and you're never going to get away from those. But most of the victims that I dealt with are just people who were defrauded. Their money was ripped off, their credit card information was stolen. And what I did at Monsters, we had a dedicated page on our website about the counterfeiting issue. We created a victim's assistance guide for people who have been defrauded on how to go to the credit card companies and get your charge back, how to get your money back, what you needed to follow, what you needed from me as far as certification in a letter form so that you could get your money back. And I found it really interesting. We had a hotline or email address for people to report infringing activity when they've been defrauded. And that grew to be a very interesting thing because once I had some people that reported bad activity, I hear from those people regularly. I would always email back and thank them for reporting it. And some of them became actually regulars. And whenever they would come across a bad website, they would email it to me. And sometimes we weren't aware of that. Or if they'd find a retailer that was obviously selling counterfeit, they would help us with that. So we actually engaged with our consumers, and they became part of the process of protecting people, which was really great. You can just product identification guides to put online. I would suggest that you only provide 2 or maybe 3 of the most obvious ways to discern counterfeit from genuine. If you put your more sophisticated security features and ways to differentiate online, the counterfeiters are watching what's online, and if you put what you're, queuing off of, they will go and fix those flaws and make it much more difficult for you to tell the fakes from the reals. And some of the counterfeits got so good I couldn't tell. I would have to send them to our Q&A department that had to open them up and actually look at the internal guts to tell me whether they were bad or not. So one that really worked is I had a list of our authorized dealers on our website, and people really appreciated that. We had put up also a blacklist of bad marketplace sellers or websites, and that list got really, really long, and it took some maintenance to keep adding the names. I actually tried to take it off the website because it was taking up so much time, but our customers complained. They really liked that, so I put it back on. That's something else you might want to think about. And put on a safe buying guide, only from authorized distributors. If the price is too good to be true, there's probably a reason for that. If they're asking for your credit card information and personal information, that's a key not to go there. If they're using payment process services beyond PayPal and other well-known ones, that's some suspect, don't go there. And also, if they weren't sure of what word to buy, I told them to contact us. Just give us a call. Call us and ask us. Call customer service and ask, hey, is this retailer or this website legitimate? And we can also help people protect themselves that way. So, in summary, it really helps to truly understand the scope and the impact of the counterfeiting problem on your business. I'm surprised at how many companies don't have proactive programs in place. There's a lot of them just not to address the problem. But I think financially, with the way the counterfeiting is floating around the world, most brands are going to be put in a position to have to put brand protection programs in place. You know, they can accept the revenue losses that are occurring, and it's becoming significant. And I don't know any brand has a saleable product that's not being counterfeited. The counterfeiters will take any product that's out there in the world, and I mean, it's counterfeit food, counterfeit diapers, things that you just would not think would be counterfeited, but it crosses all industries. And some brands think, well, you know, we don't really have a problem, and then when I talk to them and actually demonstrate with information I've pulled off the internet, they're very surprised. Some actually have said to me, well, our product is very complicated and sophisticated. They could never counterfeit it. And I explained they don't need to actually have a working product. They need to make the counterfeit look like your product in order to be able to sell it. Because the counterfeiters don't care whether it actually works or not. And they kind of come around. And that's part also the educational process that we try to promote here at MarkMonitor, is letting them know what's really happening. Really leverage your resources. You know, MarkMonitor was wonderful for me. I would call up and say, hey, I'm seeing this happening, or any of your other brands facing this problem, and they would never disclose the name of the brands, but they would tell me, yeah, other people are having the same problem, and this is how they tried to address it. This is how we were able to help them, and it was very, very helpful for me. The main thing you need to understand is that the internet's dynamic, but so are the counterfeiters. They are constantly changing their strategies. You put up a way to mitigate and suppress their activity, they're going to find a very creative way to come around it. So don't get locked into only having certain solutions in place. Be open to being adaptable, and try to be adaptable in kind of an agile manner. You know, you don't whole year to try and unroll something new. So build an expectation with your senior management that you're going to need to maybe change tracks and change direction as the bad guys evolve. So that, any questions? Please send them in.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Camilla, for such a great overview. That was excellent. We're now ready to open it up to our question and answer session, and we've had questions come in during the presentation, so we've left some time to answer those. As a quick reminder, if you have a question, please submit them via the Q&A floating toolbar on your screen, and we'll try to get to your question if we don't have time to get to it today. We'll be sure to follow up online. Go ahead and take our first question of the day. Let's see here. Okay, this one here, Camilla, they're asking about, are there any new tools out there to address the changing trend of where counterfeiters go to sell, like social media or mobile apps?
Actually, there are. And this is one of the things that I like about working at MarkMonitor, is that we're paying attention to how there are shifts. So we do have tools that can address that, and they're constantly in development, and we're constantly looking to develop new ones. So if you want more information on that, just reach out, and somebody here will be able to fill you in.
Okay, great. I see another question here. It's asking about what to do, what kind of anti-counterfeiting programs would you start with if you have a limited budget?
I would actually start with online piece. It gives you the broadest enforcement capability for your dollar spend. Then if you have the luxury later on to go out into civil litigation and criminal, you can do that. But I think you have more impact. Because the volume of sales is happening on the internet, that's where you're going to have the greatest impact. So that's where I would actually start.
Okay, great. And then here's a couple questions I see here on ROI. Which anti-counterfeiting measures provide the greatest ROI from what you've seen?
Actually, it's the online piece, and the challenge there is that some of the ROI is intangible. You know, you can't actually prove these things, your metrics, and what I would do at Monster was I would be very conservative. I'd say, okay, these are the metrics, and for people who were challenging my success, I would say, well, let's just take 30% of the quantity and value of what I remove from marketplaces and websites, I'm being ultra conservative, and let's do the dollar valuation on that. And it was still a huge number. I'm sorry. So, okay, another question.
Another question I see here. What are the ways to identify the big players versus small ones and prioritize?
It was a number of that they're selling, and having the online monitoring, you have the history of when they started selling, the volume that they've been advertising, the volume of completed sales, and on the websites you can monitor the traffic. So, and even you can have a very conservative conversion rate of how much traffic you converted back. But you do the math, even being ultra conservative, the impact is huge financially.
Okay, let's see here. I have another one here. It's a good question on what advice do you have for dealing with counterfeiters in Asia?
Asia is kind of a moving target, and so the best advice is go to the bigger players, be aware that with some of the marketplaces, you're going to have more success than with others. And over time, we're monitors developing personal relationships with these bigger marketplace platforms, and because of those relationships, we're actually having more success. And Chinese law is constantly changing as well. They're trying to become more compliant in some areas. In some areas, it's still pretty problematic. Investigations in China are more successful. Civil litigation in China is becoming more successful. Those are both kind of newer avenues. A few years ago, people would have investigations and things didn't go particularly well in the courts. But you're seeing kind of a shift in that dynamic. People are actually having some civil recovery in the courts in China, and more law enforcement agencies there and groups in different regions in China are willing to do proactive enforcement and raids and seizures for you and destroy your product.
Okay, I see some questions coming in. Let me see if there's another one here.
On the customs, does customs enforce and seize outbound counterfeit products? I know that they would unless you actually engaged with customs and developed a protocol for screening of counterfeit products. That question, actually, I would need to go back and check with my customs folks and see if they actually ever done anything like that.
I have one here too. Is asking about, can you put an example of physical security, the physical security plan interacting with a cross-functional team?
Yes. So, I'm sorry.
I can repeat the question here again. Can you provide an example of a physical security department interacting with cross-functional teams?
For example, in the pharmaceutical space, you're going to have counterfeit pharma, which is really significant and serious. I would engage with your security department, actually initiate some of these investigations, and work with law enforcement on doing the physical on-the-ground investigations or the website investigations where law enforcement, through partners with your security department, can find out who the physical people are behind the websites. If they're in jurisdictions where we can be effective, then you can actually go after them and have some impact.
Okay, thank you. It looks like we've answered all the pending questions that have come in here. If for some reason we didn't have a chance to get to your questions today, we'll be sure to follow up offline. And I thank you, Camilla, for such a great overview today. I appreciate you sharing your experience and all these great insights. And I'd also like to thank the audience, too, for your participation, as your questions always help draw out more information for those tuning in. So thank you for that. Now, as a reminder, we'll be sending out a follow-up email with a link to the webinar materials on Friday afternoon. So be on the lookout for that email. And lastly, following the event today, you'll see a brief survey which will appear momentarily. So we hope that you'll take the time to share your experience. Well, that concludes our webinar for today, everyone. Thanks again for tuning in, and have a great day.